Moving on to the next question is, what are annotations in Apex? Annotations are actually like, kind of text symbols which annotate parts of your code. If you're all from, maybe some of you from if the interview is from a Spring Boot background, like controller and other things like that, because in the C# also you have such annotations. So you have similar annotations in Apex. So there are many annotations in Apex, but in the interview you have to talk about, at least they may ask you about some relevant annotations. Actually there are many annotations, you don't need to remember everything, but read through and at least the relevant ones which I'm showing in the slides, you should be able to tell to the interviewer. @Aura enabled annotation exposes a method or property for calling from client side. If you don't annotate an Aura method as Aura enabled, Lightning Web Components will not be able to call. Aura components will not be able to call the method on a button click or anything. Okay, will not be able to identify that there is such a controller. @isTest marks a class as a test method. @future indicates that the method will be executed asynchronously in a separate thread. We'll see about synchronous and asynchronous. We have discussed before. We will look at it in more detail later. @read-only marks a method as read-only, indicating it cannot modify any data. So it's used sometimes in certain API integrations. @transient is annotation which makes that the variable should not be serialized when the object is saved to the database. So it's more like a temporary data, so you don't want it to go from the client server. It is used more in Visualforce pages. Okay, you declare a transient that you don't want a data to be transferred to the server many times, or you just want to use it locally for storing some information. Depreciated means the method is no longer used or will be removed in the future. Cacheable, another important annotation. The results will be cached, like say in improving performance in Lightning components. Like say for example, Aura enabled and cacheable equal to true. What happens is methods, especially the any methods that you query. So going ahead, once you use the LWC component and does a query from that method, if you use cacheable, next time what will happen is it will try to store a local cache of the data and it will not go to the server unless there is a change in the data. Next is web service. If you mark a web service a method as a SOAP web service, it will become available for external calls as a web service definition language file. Now whenever you do test classes, usually the test class is data that you create for test class is dummy data and it is not saved to the database. If you use @isTest SeeAllData equal to true, it allows access to the direct production org data, and the data that you create, update, a query can be from the actual server. So this is generally avoided, but you should know that such a thing is. Interview may ask you what is SeeAllData equal to true. Now some more annotations to remember, better to remember during interview, because we don't know, they could ask you in case of intermediate levels. Invocable method. If you mark a method, if you want a method to be called from a flow or a process builder, you have to give it invocable method, and it takes only primitive data types. Same with invocable variables. Queuable marks a class that implements a queuable interface for asynchronous processing. This is a replacement for @future. Batchable, it indicates it's a batch class. @schedule is used in conjunction with system.schedule. This we will look at in detail in the batch Apex, but these are the definitions. These are the definitions of your annotations. And test visible, allow methods to be visible in test class even if they are private. If you want certain methods to be visible in the test classes, you can give @test visible. And the last, we have seen some of those HTTP GET, HTTP post, some of the REST API methods for controllers. Okay, so when you define a local controller endpoint, so HTTP GET, post, put, or typical HTTP method used to get, that is read, update, create data. Okay, so these are some of the basic annotations. Next we'll be looking at governor limits. So and during an interview you should read it up. There are some more. Please, I would suggest you to go to the trailhead. Some of the important ones out of this I would say are Aura enabled, isTest, future, transient, web service, cacheable, batchable, queuable, invocable, and the HTTP method. So these I would see, at least see during the interview you should be able to answer at least some of them. Okay, if not all. Then the interview will know that okay, you are not only aware, you have also maybe worked a little bit in depth. Okay, so thank you. See you in the next